Jesus Christ, in the Gospel of St. Matthew, responded to Simon Peter's confession, where Peter was the first to openly declare Jesus as the Son of God. Recognizing that this revelation came from God the Father, Jesus called Peter a rock and said that upon this rock he would build his church, so strong that even the forces of hell could not overcome it. Three key points stand out from this. First, Christ intended to establish a church in this world. Second, this church would face fierce opposition, not just from the world, but from the strongest forces of hell. Third, despite all the devil's efforts, this church would endure and prevail. This prophecy of Christ has been remarkably fulfilled. The entire history of the church up to now has been a testament to this prophecy. First, it's clear that Christ established a church. Second, throughout history, powerful rulers and their subjects have tried, both openly and secretly, with all their might to destroy this church. And third, despite all this, the church has survived and held its ground. It's amazing to see how many challenges the church has faced and overcome. To demonstrate this more clearly, I have prepared this history to show the marvelous works of God in His church, to glorify Him. By documenting the church's journey over time, readers can gain knowledge and experience, benefiting their faith. While we won't go into detail about Jesus' life before or after His crucifixion, it's important to remind readers of the defeat of the Jews through His resurrection. Even though one apostle betrayed Him, another denied Him under oath, and the rest abandoned Him, except for the disciple who was known to the high priest. 5. The story of His resurrection changed their hearts. After receiving the Holy Spirit, they gained new confidence and boldly proclaimed His name, to the dismay of the Jewish leaders and the amazement of Gentile converts. Saint Stephen was the first Christian martyr after Jesus, and he was killed because of his bold preaching about the gospel, which condemned those who betrayed and killed Christ. His words angered the crowd so much that they dragged him out of the city and stoned him to death. This is believed to have happened during the Passover, following Jesus' crucifixion and ascension in the spring. After Stephen's death, a widespread persecution began against all those who believed in Jesus as the Messiah. St. Luke tells us that a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, forcing many believers to flee to the regions of Judea and Samaria, though the apostles stayed behind. During this persecution, around 2,000 Christians, including Nicanor, one of the 7 deacons, were martyred. The next martyr was James the Great, the son of Zebedee and the elder brother of John. He was also related to Jesus through his mother Salome, who was a cousin of the Virgin Mary. James was martyred about 10 years after Stephen's death, when Herod Agrippa became governor of Judea. Seeking to win favor with the Jewish leaders, Herod launched a severe persecution against Christians and targeted their leaders. According to Clemens Alexandrinus, an early Christian writer, as James was led to his execution, his accuser was so moved by James's courage and bravery that he repented, fell at James's feet, and declared himself a Christian. Both James and his accuser were then beheaded together. This event happened in AD 44, and James's martyrdom fulfilled his earlier promise to Jesus that he was ready to drink the cup of suffering. At the same time, other early Christians, Timon and Parmenas, were also martyred. Timon in Philippi and Parmenas in Macedonia. Philip was born in Bethsaida, Galilee, and was initially known as a disciple of Jesus. He worked diligently in Upper Asia and was martyred in Heliopolis, Phrygia. Philip was scourged, imprisoned, and then crucified around AD 54. Matthew, originally a tax collector and born in Nazareth, wrote his gospel in Hebrew. This was later translated into Greek by James the Less. Matthew preached in Parthia and Ethiopia, where he was martyred by being killed with a halberd in the city of Nadabah, around AD 60. James the Less is thought by some to have been Jesus' brother, born to Joseph from a previous marriage. This idea is questionable and aligns with the Catholic belief that Mary had no other children besides Jesus. James the Less was chosen to oversee the churches in Jerusalem and wrote the Epistle of James in the New Testament. At the age of 94, he was beaten and stoned by the Jews and eventually killed with a club. Matthias, who is less well known than many other disciples, was chosen to replace Judas Iscariot. He was stoned in Jerusalem and then beheaded. Andrew was Peter's brother. He preached the gospel in many Asian countries. When he arrived in Edessa, he was captured and crucified on a cross shaped like an X, which is now known as St. Andrew's Cross. St. Mark was born to Jewish parents from the tribe of Levi. It's believed he became a Christian through Peter, whom he helped by writing down his teachings. Mark wrote his gospel in Greek. Sadly, he was violently killed by the people of Alexandria during a festival for their idol Serapis. The apostle Peter was sentenced to death and crucified. Some say this happened in Rome, though others question this. According to Hegesippus, Emperor Nero wanted Peter dead, and when Peter's followers urged him to flee the city, he tried to leave. However, he saw a vision of Jesus, who said he was going to be crucified again. Understanding this as a sign, Peter returned to the city and asked to be crucified upside down, feeling unworthy to die in the same way as Jesus. The apostle Paul, originally named Saul, was executed during Nero's persecution of Christians. According to Abdius, Nero sent two of his officers, Pharega and Parthemius, to report back on Paul's death. When they found Paul preaching, they asked him to pray for their conversion. Paul told them they would soon believe and be baptized at his grave. After praying, Paul was beheaded. Jude, also called Thaddeus, was the brother of James. He was crucified in Edessa in the year 72 AD. Bartholomew spread the gospel in various countries and translated the Gospel of Matthew into the language of India. He was eventually beaten and crucified by people who worshipped idols. Thomas, also known as Didymus, preached the gospel in Parthia and India. He was martyred by being pierced with a spear after angering the pagan priests. Luke, the author of the Gospel of Luke, traveled with Paul to different countries. It's believed he was hanged on an olive tree by idol-worshipping priests in Greece. Simon Zelotes preached the gospel in Mauritania, Africa, and even in Britain. He was crucified in Britain in the year 74 AD. John, known as the beloved disciple, was the brother of James the Great. He founded the churches in Smyrna, Pergamos, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, and Thyatira. He was sent from Ephesus to Rome, where it's said that he was thrown into a pot of boiling oil, but miraculously survived without harm. Later, Emperor Domitian exiled him to the Isle of Patmos, where he wrote the book of Revelation. When Nerva succeeded Domitian, he allowed John to return. John was the only apostle who did not die a violent death. Barnabas was from Cyprus and of Jewish descent. He is believed to have died around the year 73 AD. Despite all the relentless persecution and terrible punishments, the Christian church continued to grow, firmly rooted in the teachings of the apostles and others who followed their example, and was greatly strengthened by the sacrifices of its saints.